Welcome to the Vol Bros. My name is Evan. This is my brother Rustin. We are two Vol Bros who are actually bros in real life. And this is always a fun episode we do in the summertime as we prepare for football season. We're going to predict every single SEC team's football record for the 2024 season. Our goal was to live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and X. We did upgrade to a premium account on X so that we could live stream, but it's still not letting us. I guess our account's still under verification, so maybe that's why. But we're trying to stream on X. We're trying. It's just not letting us yet. So we'll keep you posted on how that works out. But we are live on Facebook and YouTube. And so we're thankful for those of you who are joining us already. As we go through these team by team in alphabetical order, we would love to hear your predictions for each team's record as well. So please give us those in the comments. So without further ado, Rustin, let's go through some schedules here. So we'll start with Alabama. Alabama starts the season at home against Western Kentucky and then hosts South Florida at the home and home from last year and this year. They go on the road to Wisconsin. Then they host Georgia. Then they go to Vanderbilt. Then they host South Carolina. Then they go to Knoxville. Then they host Missouri. Then they go to LSU. Then they host Alabama. Then they go to Oklahoma. And then they host Auburn. So after the first two games, it's literally alternating every other week. Home away, home away, home away, home away. So in that schedule, Rustin, what record do you foresee for Alabama fans?
I've got them at 10-2. I think they lose to Georgia and Texas. I'm sorry, 9-3. I've got them losing to Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. So I've got them at 9-3.
I don't think they play Texas, do they?
Did I type it wrong?
They play Oklahoma this year. They play Oklahoma.
That's right. I wrote down. I can't even read my own writing. I've got them at 10-2, losing to Georgia and Tennessee.
So I'm going to make a lot of enemies right up front. I tried to convince myself. I don't even believe some of my picks. I tried to talk myself out of some of them, but I don't know, man. Sometimes you just have a feeling. And I will say that last year when we did this, we were pretty daggum close on every single one of them. There was only one that both of us missed pretty good, and that was Missouri. But everybody else, we're really close. I missed Tennessee's by one game. The year before that, I nailed Tennessee's 10-2. So here's my prediction for Alabama. I have them going 9-3 with losses to Georgia, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. I don't know, something about that Oklahoma game. It's late in the season. It's the week before the Auburn game. It's at Oklahoma. By that, Oklahoma is going to be a good team. That's why I'm thankful Tennessee plays them early in the season. I don't know. I think that's one of those upset specials in Norman, Oklahoma there. And when we think about Tennessee, if you had asked me when I woke up this morning, is Tennessee going to beat Alabama? I'd have said no. But the more I looked at it tonight, as I looked at it and looked at the schedule and how it laid out, I don't know, man. Sometimes you just get that feeling. Prior to this live stream, I would have said Tennessee was going 10-2. But I might have changed that. I don't know. Sometimes you just get a feeling. So I'm going to say Alabama goes 9-3. Mino Lackey said, evening, bros in chat. Welcome. Good to have you, Mino Lackey. Big Vol Daddy, welcome, buddy. He said, good evening, fellas. Have a great show. Thank you, man. We appreciate that very much. Let's see here. Herb's watching on Facebook. Good to have you, Herb. We're glad you're with us, buddy. All right, so there's our predictions for Alabama. Rustin said 10-2. I said 9-3. So now let's look at Arkansas. So Arkansas hosts Arkansas Pine Bluff, start the season. Then they big time game. They immediately go to Oklahoma State next week. Then they host UAB, go to Auburn, go to Texas A&M, host Tennessee and LSU, go to Mississippi State, and then are home the 3 of their last 4 games. They host Ole Miss, Texas, Louisiana Tech, and then they go to Missouri. Very, very difficult, in my opinion, very difficult schedule to predict for Arkansas. I think they're going to be very different from last year. So what do you think, Rustin? What you got for the Arkansas this year?
Unfortunately for Sam Pittman, I don't see this going well. I've got them finishing 5-7 with losses to Oklahoma State, Auburn, Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri.
So we were actually extremely close on that. I also have them going 5-7. I have them losing to Oklahoma State, and I have them losing to Auburn. Or excuse me, I have them losing to Texas A&M instead of Auburn. And then also losses against Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri, just like you had.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing we differed on there was you picked Auburn to beat them. I picked A&M to beat them. Honestly, both teams might beat them. It's going to be a very interesting season, a very difficult schedule for Arkansas, a very difficult schedule. I'll talk about the Tennessee game with them when we go to Tennessee's schedule. All right, so I have Arkansas finishing 5-7. You also had them finishing 5-7. Some of the folks join us in the chat here. Mississippi Vol, welcome, buddy. He said, good evening, good to see you guys back on here. I appreciate that very much. Eric said, what's up, Vol Bros? Good to have you, Eric. Welcome. I'm glad you're joining us, buddy. All right, so next up on the list is Auburn. Auburn hosts Alabama A&M. Then they host California, which is the second half of that home and home they had last year. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Their first 5 games are all home games. New Mexico, Arkansas, Oklahoma. And then their next 3 games are away games. So then they go to Georgia, Missouri, and Kentucky. And then they have 3 more home games: Vanderbilt, Louisiana Monroe, and Texas A&M. And then they finish the season at Alabama. So whereas Alabama's was alternating home away, these are just very much large chunks. For example, Auburn will not play at home the entire month of October. So that's going to be really weird for Auburn fans. What do you see on their schedule here?
So I'm a big believer in Hugh Freeze, especially in Hugh Freeze after he's had time to build a roster. The entire Auburn athletic department is angry at Hugh Freeze right now for spending all their NIL money. So that bodes well for his roster. So I have Auburn at 8-4 with
Whoa.
losses. Yep, with the losses to Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, and Alabama.
So you have them beating both Arkansas and Texas A&M.
Yes. I think Sam Pittman is destined for termination this year, and I don't think A&M has the roster depth or the coaching staff yet to contend with anyone. Mike Elko's a good coach. He hired a good offensive coordinator, but they don't have anybody. Their roster's depleted. They have 0 depth. I'm not concerned about A&M as a factor this year.
So I have Auburn going 6-6, losing to all the same teams you had, but also Arkansas and A&M. So all 6 losses for me would be Arkansas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, A&M, and Bama. And that A&M game, it's the week before the Iron Bowl. Possible, that they're looking ahead maybe. However, I still have them going bowling. So that'd be good for them. Definitely, right steps, I guess. Let's see. Some of the folks chiming in said, Sam, welcome, buddy. He said, I think the one conference game Arkansas can win is Mississippi State. Mississippi State's going to have a rough year for sure. Green Wave said Auburn's a real wild card, more so than just about any SEC team. I think that's a fair assessment. Welcome, Green Wave. Good to have you, buddy. Caleb Long, welcome, buddy. He said, hi, Vol Bros. Good to see you. Sam said it could be difficult to beat Kentucky for Auburn. I agree. And honestly, I went back and forth on that game. Originally, I had them at 5-7, losing to Kentucky, but because Hugh Freeze is a good football coach, I leaned towards okay, they might pull that one out, and so I think their talent level will out talent and they'll out coach Kentucky, which is why they might get that win there. But that's going to be a very difficult game. I totally agree with Sam. All right, so I have Auburn 6-6. You have Auburn 8-4. All right. Big Orange said, so is it confirmed that we just had the best college baseball team of all time? I don't think of all time, but definitely best Tennessee baseball team of all time. For sure about that.
I don't know. You could make a case. I mean, one of the only teams ever to finish in the top 10, both in hitting and pitching. First SEC team ever to win 60 games. You know, there's a lot there. The offensive numbers, you could make a case.
Caleb said he has Auburn going 8-4 as well. All three of those graphics that we've shown so far are courtesy of secsports.com, by the way. This next one is courtesy of inallkindsofweather.com. And that's Florida. Florida's schedule. On their schedule, the games that have orange on the left are home games. The games that have blue on the left are away games. So they start the season off hosting Miami. Then they host Samford. Then they host Texas A&M. Then they go to Mississippi State. They host Central Florida. Then they go to Tennessee. They host Kentucky. Then they have in Jacksonville against Georgia. Then they go to Texas. Then they host LSU and host Ole Miss. Then they finish their regular season by going to Florida State. Now, we have been saying for over a year, I mean, I think the first time we said this was like last April or May. We've been saying for over a year that this is going to be the toughest schedule in the history of college football. And I still believe it is. This is an incredibly difficult schedule. I do not envy Billy Napier. This is going to be just brutal on any team. So, Rustin, what do you predict for a record for Florida?
Yeah, I've got Florida going 5-7. I think at best they're 6-6. I think they lose to Miami, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. Again, I'm not a believer in A&M. I think they're going to take a massive step back this year. But I could also see, a scenario where they go 4-8 and lose to Central Florida as well. So, I think it is the hardest schedule that has ever been accumulated. Florida's got some decent depth at offensive skill position, but nowhere else. The offensive line is terrible. The defense is terrible. I think they're 5-7 at best.
So I actually had the exact same prediction as you, 5-7 with losses to all the same teams. When you look at the first half of their season, those first 5 games, they got Miami, Samford, A&M, Mississippi State, and Central Florida. If they want to get any wins, they better hope they come in those first 5 games. I think, some people are picking Miami to be in the playoff this year. I mean, people have a lot of confidence in Miami. I don't think they're going to be in the playoff necessarily, but I do think that, that's a really tough game to start the season with for Florida. So obviously they have experience at quarterback. Like you said, they have a lot of talent at skill positions. But as we all know, the game's won and lost in the line of scrimmage. And that's a tough schedule there. So if they beat Miami, then there is a chance that they enter Knoxville 5-0. We're both predicting them to enter Knoxville 4-1. But that second half of their season, it's just brutal. It's brutal. You have to go to Texas. You host LSU. You host Ole Miss. You have to go to Florida State. You play Georgia in a neutral site, and you have to go to Tennessee. Good luck. Good grief. That is incredibly, incredibly brutal. A lot of teams, a lot of times teams will, you get 8 conference games, 4 out of conference games. You have to play one Power 5 opponent. Well, now it's Power 4, but a lot of times those other 3 games, people just schedule Cupcake City. And Florida did not do that. Their 4 out of conference games are Miami, Central Florida, Florida State, and Samford. And last year, Samford was pretty dang good. So, that's going to be tough. Very, very tough.
The only reason why I think UCF won't sneak up on them is it is the week after the bye. So I think that's the only reason I picked them to beat UCF. But I could very easily see them coming into Knoxville probably 4-1, but I could easily see them 3-2 already.
Yeah, absolutely. If they want to win some games, they better steal some in that early part of the season. That's the bottom line, because that second half is just a murderer's row. It's just brutal. It's brutal.
Oh, after that second bye week, they're going 0-5. It's not
exactly.
It's not going to be close. They're going to get killed all 5 of those games.
Herb said, so the loser of Florida Miami game, their coach is leaving the town. Definitely going to be put on the hot seat immediately after that one.
Yeah,
whoever loses.
If Mario Cristobal loses that game, yeah, he's squarely on the hot seat, because he should have no problem beating Florida this year.
Sam said Florida will be better than a lot of people are saying. There are a lot of people talking about exactly what you're saying, Sam. There's a lot of national analysts who think they'll be good because of the talent they have. It's just that schedule is so tough.
I don't buy it. I keep saying, show me what talent. Their secondary is depleted. Their linebacker core is completely unproven. They've got a couple of decent defensive linemen, but there's no depth. Their offensive line is terrible. They've got some skill kids, and they've got a quarterback that could be decent, but he ain't going to be decent if the offensive line can't block anybody. So people keep saying, watch out for Florida. And I'm like, what are we watching out for? Because I don't see it.
Monica, we're glad you're with us. Green Wave said the only thing that negates Florida having the worst schedule ever is how many key games are at home or in state. Now, that's a fair point about being in state. They're playing all 4 major teams in the state of Florida in their schedule.
Yeah.
They've got Miami, Central Florida, Florida State. Well, they're the 4th. So they're playing the other 3 major schools in their state, in their schedule. So they're not shying away from competition. I'll give them that. Evan, welcome, Evan. Good to have you, buddy. He said that he thinks they have 3 wins at best. I think they sneak out more than that, but it's going to be tough for sure. Sam made a good point. He said if they have injuries early, they're in trouble for sure. Because they ain't making it past that second half. Tony, welcome, Tony. Good to have you, buddy. He said Texas A&M, Kentucky may win 7 games. Florida wins 6 games. I think that's fair about Florida there. Sam said, I'm glad they have Mississippi State prior to us so that we can better see weaknesses. Agreed. Absolutely. Carl. Carl said, go Gators. Hey, Carl, you're in Gator country down there, aren't you? I'm pretty sure Florida. I'm pretty sure Carl's from Florida. He said, wish the Gators could have played South Florida. So I think Carl's actually in Tampa. I think so. South Florida is right in his backyard. You can let me know if I'm right or wrong there, Carl. Some of the other comments about Tennessee baseball game. People are still loving them. Some riding that high, baby, riding that high. Big Orange said we broke a lot of records. With the first team ever to have 5 players hit 20 or more homers. I totally agree, 100%. Sam said it's the best hitting team, Tennessee hitting team ever. I agree with that also, 100%. Caleb Longcare said Tennessee is the true home run kings because they hit all those home runs without the super bats. That's absolutely, totally agree. Tony or Big Orange said we broke the Grand Slam record for the SEC. Also, totally agree, 100%. No doubt they're the best Tennessee baseball team ever, for sure. Whether best baseball team ever, period. That's tough. I mean, there were some great Mississippi State teams that had Rafael Palmeiro and Will Clark on them. That's a tough one. Tony said he's got Oklahoma, LSU, and Auburn winning at least 8. Let's see here. Big Orange said our pitching is going to be unbelievable this upcoming year. We could go back to back like South Carolina did in 10 and 11. Man, I hope so. Absolutely. Sign me up. Big Orange said Tennessee baseball players are going to be like Kentucky basketball players in the pros. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point too. There's going to be a bunch of them. Oh, Carl said he's from St. Pete. Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Rustin and I, our mom took us to stay at the Don Cesar when we were kids. Such a cool place, man. Such a cool place. Let's see. Brent said, as much as I hope they keep him, I think Billy Napier is fired before the end of the season. Yeah, I mean, especially okay, since there's so much positive potential early in the season for Florida, it might get to, that Central Florida game and they're sitting at 4-1. Everybody's like, woo, yeah. And then they lose Tennessee, they're 4-2, but they beat Kentucky 5-2 and they go into a bye week up, hey, 5-2, all right. And then wham, the next 5 games and they're 5-7 in the season. I mean, you're right. By that Florida State game, it might be, all right, it's done, that kind of thing. Let's see. Brent said, I don't see him making it through the gauntlet this year alive. Florida will be first Power 5 school replacing their head coach this year. Book it. I mean, the last 5 games of the season are just brutal. Just brutal. Some of the other comments about baseball coming through. Herb said, how huge is it to get those top 100 plus kids to campus? Okay, that's true for both baseball and football. That they've had a ton of football kids on campus right now. So that's true for both sports, actually. Let's see. Carl said, would have bested the record if we played 9 innings all the time for home runs. I agree. We got, 22 innings we got gypped out of because of the run rule.
Yeah.
Sam said, Rustin has me fired up after telling us about our reload from our show on Thursday or Friday, actually. If you missed that show, go check that out. So Rustin and I both had we didn't talk about this beforehand, but we both had the exact same prediction for Florida, including the same losses. So both of us had them going 5-7. My guess is we're probably going to have the same prediction for the next one too, which is Georgia. What do you got going for Georgia, Rustin?
I have them going 12-0 and winning the national championship.
Yeah, I've got them going 12-0 as well. I mean, we talked about this a few weeks ago. At quarterback, they're 3 deep at quarterback without really losing much talent or any stride at all in any of them that they put out there.
Yep.
I mean, like it's really not fair what they have in the quarterback room right now. How in the world they're keeping all 3 of those guys there, I don't know. But obviously this year it's pretty much settled who's going to be starting. But next year they could have a very big time quarterback battle in their hands for sure. But they are totally loaded, and so I 100% agree they go 12-0. We'll see what happens in the playoff. Who knows what can happen in a playoff? Crazy things can happen there. So we'll see what happens there. But I do have them finishing the regular season 12-0. All right. Sam's talking about Rick Barnes. He said Rick Barnes hitting the recruiting trail hard. Just
a quick comment on Georgia. They are so incredibly deep that's what makes them scary good. Is it doesn't matter what position you look at on the field, there's really good depth everywhere. And probably the greatest example of that is Branson Robinson had a really good year last year at running back until he got injured. The year before, he had a very good year. He's third string. As a freshman, he played in 12 games, had 68 carries for 341 yards as a true freshman. Going into his sophomore year before he got injured, they were like, he's going to be top 2. He's third string. Like, Branson Robinson might be one of the top 10 running backs in the entire SEC, and he's their third guy. It's ridiculous how much depth they have, and all the way across the board. Like you said, quarterback. I mean, their third string quarterback is Jaden Rashada. If he had ended up at Florida, he'd be starting right now. So
this would be his second year starting at Florida.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous, the depth all across that roster.
And when you look at their schedule, I mean, they have an incredibly difficult schedule.
Yeah,
but it doesn't matter. Like, that's the thing. Like, they open the season a neutral site game against Clemson. Tennessee Tech, Kentucky, they're going to handle business there. Then they go to Alabama. That will not be an easy game. It'll be an incredible game. Then they host Auburn immediately after that. That'll be another good game. Then they're going to pound Mississippi State. Then they go to Texas. They have to go to Alabama and to Texas within 4 weeks of each other. If they were going to lose one, it'd be one of those two.
I'm just sitting here looking at their depth chart. 6 of their 11 starters on defense will probably get drafted in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft this year.
Then they've got back-to-back really difficult games in November. They got to go to Ole Miss, and then they host Tennessee. I mean, they've got really 6 games, and just 7 if you include Florida, that are really tough games. I mean, like, most teams would not make it through that unscathed, but they're so good that they probably will, which is crazy. I love Caleb's confidence here. Caleb said, "I see Georgia going 1-11. I mean 11-1." He said, "I think Nico can pull it off." I love it, buddy. I love it. I hope so. I don't think it,
but in the trenches, I'm not so sure about that.
Especially at Georgia, that makes it even tougher. Carl said Georgia has always been loaded since Kirby's been there, loaded to the rafters, and rarely loses players. Yep. Evan said 12-team playoff makes things harder for Kirby, but Kirby's going to run the table for the next 10 years. He said he is Nick Saban 2.0. I think that's actually probably a pretty good analogy. Sam said Georgia's not going 12-0. Go ahead.
This defense is going to remind a lot of people of those amazing Alabama defenses that were just suffocating and nobody could score on. This defense is going to remind a lot of people of that.
So Sam said Georgia's not going 12-0. That stretch there. So I'm gonna amend his comment there. He said Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Texas run will tell the tale. I'm gonna extend that out. I'm gonna say Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row where Mississippi State is actually the weakest opponent in those 7 games. So they got 6 games straight there that are going to be really, really difficult games. If they go through that stretch undefeated, they deserve to win the national championship. Like, just give it to them at that point, because that's incredible. Sam said, "Feed them that rat poison, Rustin." I love it. Caleb said, "Well, look back when Dobbs did it with a terrible coaching staff. That's what Nico reminds me of." It was also not quite as good of a Georgia team, and Tennessee's roster was also really good back then. I mean, you had Alvin Kamara, you had Jawan Jennings, Josh Malone. I mean, like they were pretty good too. I agree. This roster is better than that one. I agree with that. I hope they beat him. It'd be wonderful. Evan said Lane goes to Florida after Napier gets fired. Let's see. I can't remember. That'd be the next to last game of the season. I think he'll still be there then. I think the last game of the season, that's when he'll be gone. That's. I mean, maybe though. Who knows? All right. So I have. Oh, we both did Georgia already. Now I'm thinking about Florida again. All right. So both of us say Florida 12-0. All right. Kentucky, they're next up.
Georgia 12.
What do you think about? Or yeah, Georgia 12-0. Florida 5-7. Georgia 12-0.
Yep.
What do you think about Kentucky?
The usual song and dance. Week schedule.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me say this first, because the people who are listening to the audio version of this, they can't see my graphic on the screen. And thanks to Knoxville Sports or Kentucky Sports Radio and on3.com for the graphic for this one. I'm going to give credit to every single one of them. They open the season hosting Southern Miss. Then they host South Carolina and Georgia and Ohio, not Ohio State, the Ohio Bobcats. Then they go to Ole Miss, have a bye week and host Vandy. Then they go to Florida, and then they host Auburn. Then they go to Tennessee. Then they have a bye week. And then, I don't know, I think it's McNeese State, I think, is the November 16th game. I can't remember, though. I could be wrong. And then it's a FCS team. And then they go to Texas, and then they host Louisville to end the game, or in the season. So what do you think about them? Where are their wins in that right there?
Number one, they have zero offensive threat at all. Poor Brock Vandegrift. I don't know what he was thinking transferring to Kentucky. I don't know if he just enjoys punishment. It's going to be a very long year for him. I think they're at best 6-6. It's the typical Kentucky extremely weak schedule. They'll go 6-6. They'll put up another statue of Mark Stoops and give him a 27-year extension, and celebrate going to the Music City Bowl or the Birmingham Bowl for the 37th time in a row. Typical Kentucky schedule. I think they lose to. I've got them losing to Georgia, Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, and Texas.
I've got literally the exact same.
Essentially, I've got them losing to the only 6 decent teams on their schedule.
Yeah. I've literally got the exact same prediction. I had them going 6-6 with losses, those exact same people. We did not talk about this beforehand. But that's who I had too. Sam helped us out. He said it's Murray State on the November 16th. Hey, we appreciate that, Sam. Let's see. Caleb Longcare said they go 9-3 at best, 7-5 rock bottom. Losses to Texas, Tennessee, Auburn, Louisville, and Georgia. I think that's fair. But
that Florida game's in the swamp, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I don't see this Kentucky offense going into the swamp and doing anything.
The other thing that might be different about that is they have to go to Ole Miss, and I don't think they're going to win at Ole Miss.
They could play that on the moon, and they won't beat Ole Miss. It doesn't matter where they could pick anywhere they want and play that game, and they will not come remotely close to Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss is going to be good this year. Let's see. Sam said South Carolina will be tough that early, potentially. Thankfully for Kentucky, they have them at home. Let's see here. Sam said Kirby's busy fixing traffic tickets. Yeah, no kidding.
That's the truth. On a weekly basis.
Fort Rep 1 said, will Florida have a good team this year? I mean, they're not going to be bad. It's just their schedule's so difficult. I mean, like, just so difficult. Rustin and I both predicted they go 5-7. because of their schedule. Evan said Kentucky goes 7-5 here. So a lot of 6 and 6s, 7 and 5s, that kind of thing for Kentucky. Let's see here. LSU. LSU's next up on the list. So LSU has an interesting schedule. They open the season with, I mean, it's kind of an away game, but it's a neutral site game against Southern California in Las Vegas. That's a weird start. It's also on a Sunday. September 1st is a Sunday. Then they play Nicholls State. Then they go to South Carolina. They host UCLA. That'll be a cool game. Then they host South Alabama, have a bye week, and then host Ole Miss. Then they go to Arkansas, to Texas A&M, have a bye week, and then they host Alabama. Then they go to Florida and then finish out the season hosting Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Now, I do think it's significant for LSU fans that arguably the two toughest games on their schedule, Ole Miss and Alabama, they get them both at home, and they get them both after a bye week. So that is very favorable for LSU. So, Rustin, what do you think happens with LSU here?
Can't spell choke without Brian Kelly. So I've got it's in there. You just got to play with it.
I got you. Middle name included.
Right. You just got to mess around with it. It's there.
Yeah, I got you.
So I've got them at 10-2, losing to Bama and Ole Miss, only because I just don't think they can score with Alabama and Ole Miss. I'm not a believer in Garrett Nussmeier. They're going to have to prove to me that he is what they say he is. I could even see them 9-3. Typically early in the season, your defense is a little behind your offense. I could see Southern Cal rolling into Vegas and outscoring them. I didn't say beat them. I said outscore them. That's a different thing. I think the only thing that could potentially win that game is LSU does have Blake Baker at defensive coordinator. And if there's any coordinator who could overcome early season miscues defensively, it's Blake Baker. LSU may have the best defensive coordinator in the entire country. So if there's anybody who can win that game on defense in week one, it's Blake Baker. So only because of him, I'm giving them that win. But I also could easily see Southern Cal outscoring them because, again, I'm not a believer in Garrett Nussmeier yet. And if so, I could see 9-3, but I'm going to pick 10-2, just giving the benefit of the doubt.
So I almost picked USC to beat him at the beginning. That's a tough one, man. It's going to be a good game. It's going to be so close. But I still think they go 9-3 with losses to Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma.
So you're a big believer in Oklahoma. You and I are not on the same page on that one.
I got a little upset special. It's late. See, that's my thing about Oklahoma. It's a whole new crew, basically. Like on offense, especially on offense, new offense coordinator, new quarterback, literally 5 new starters on the offensive line. But they do have a lot of talent. And so by the end of the season, I think they start gelling really well and playing their best football at the end of the season. And I think we got a little, sometimes you just get a feeling about things, and I think they're going to go into Death Valley and pull off an upset to finish off the season. So I got LSU 9-3, losses to Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma. So Evan said he thinks LSU's going 10-2. And he said said of production to reproduce from last year's offense. He said, I also feel like Oklahoma's being slept on. Sam said Oklahoma's going to give LSU a very hard time. They sure are. Carl said he thinks they're going 7-5. That's what I'm talking about, Carl. Caleb Longcare said LSU goes 9-3, losses to interesting. Losses to Ole Miss, Alabama, and UCLA. That's an interesting pick there. There you go. I'd love to see it. UCLA will have a brand new coach. I'd love to see that happen, but that'd be a big upset there. Let's see.
That one would be a Brian Kelly special, and he does have those in him from time to time.
Tony said, I got Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss going to the playoffs with Bama, Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma fighting for the last spot. I don't think they let more than 4 SEC schools in. I got us going 9-3. If we win at Oklahoma, we may win 10. I think that's a pretty good prediction. I think that's a very good prediction. Sam said LSU 9-3 or worse. So there's our predictions for LSU. Oh, hang on. I'm going to write down Rustin's too, because I'm going to go back and look and see. He's got an SEC championship game at the end. Carl said he thinks that they lose to A&M and Florida in the Swamp. They have to go to both places. Very well could happen. But LSU will be pretty good, though. They'll be pretty good. But Carl is the Nostradamus of picking college football games, so it's hard to argue with Carl. He has a track record of success here. So next team, we got Ole Miss, and this is courtesy OleMissSports.com. Oh, the LSU graphic came from the Southeastern Conference. Tells you I'm going to give credit every time. So Ole Miss graphic from OleMissSports.com. Talk about an easy schedule. They got an easy schedule, buddy. The first half of their schedule is a cakewalk. They host Furman, host MTSU, go to Wake Forest, host Georgia Southern, host Kentucky, and go to South Carolina. If they do not start 6-0, something is bad wrong in Mississippi. The second half of the season gets a little bit tougher. They go to Death Valley to play LSU. They have a bye week, then they host Oklahoma. They go to Arkansas. Then they host Georgia. Then they have a bye week, and then they go to Florida. And then they end their season in the Egg Bowl with Mississippi State. So, Rustin, what do you see here for Ole Miss?
I'm a big believer in the roster Lane has. He's got an insane amount of talent. Offensively, he might have the most skill talent of any team in the SEC. He can score on anybody in a lot of different ways. I've got them going 11-1 with their only loss being Georgia because of how weak this schedule is. The only caveat I see there, I could see them going 10-2 if Blake Baker is able to hold them down in Death Valley. Again, LSU has the best defensive coordinator in America. If he can find a way to slow them down in Death Valley, I could see them going 10-2. But I've got them at 11-1.
So I also have them going 11-1 with only a loss to Georgia. I think that I mean this schedule, man, the first half of the schedule is just like scrimmage games getting ready for the second half of the schedule.
Yep.
I have them going 11-1 with the only loss to Georgia. Evan also said 11-1 for Ole Miss. Herb said strength of schedule keeps them out of the playoffs unless they get lucky in SEC championship game. Well, this strength of schedule, the first half of it, I would agree, is the Pits. The second half of it's pretty strong. But the first half is just, let's go throw it around the yard a little bit and win a football game. Caleb has go ahead, Rustin.
It is ridiculous when you look at their offensive depth chart. I mean, the skill guys just go, I mean, it's unbelievable. They can go 8 deep at wide receiver without losing any talent, and their top 3 are all going to be top round draft picks in the NFL. Caden Prescorn, their tight end, is going to be an NFL player. You know, a running back, they've got Ulysses Bentley and Henry Parrish. They've got Rashad Amos as the third stringer. He's a transfer from Miami of Ohio that was one of the leading rushers in the country last year. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They can go on, and what's more ridiculous is if something happens to Jackson Dart, they got Walker Howard sitting there ready, and he might actually be better. He's just biding his time, letting Jackson Dart be the senior starter, but Walker Howard might actually be the better quarterback. It's ridiculous how many weapons they have.
Let's see. Caleb Longcare said 9-3 losses to Georgia, Kentucky, and Wake Forest.
Not a chance. No way.
I love it. There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
The only way they lose to Wake Forest is if they have a bus crash on the way there. It ain't happening.
Carl said, "Are we looking at Mizzou's schedule? Ole Miss got a lot of easy ducks like Mizzou. We will. We sure will." Herb said he's either going to go 10-2 or 9-3 with losses to LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia. I mean, if there's 3 teams on the schedule that can beat them, it would be those 3. I agree. Sam said Ole Miss could run the table with their difficult games being at home. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, they do have to go to LSU, but I mean, Oklahoma and Georgia at home. They have to go to Florida, but I mean, it's a very, very favorable schedule for sure. So I got them going 11-1. Rustin has them going 11-1. Let's look at our next team, which would be the other team in Mississippi State. Now, this graphic is very difficult to read. So this graphic is courtesy of Mississippi State football's Facebook page. So I'll read
trying to hide their schedule.
Yeah, exactly. They start the season hosting Eastern Kentucky. Then they go to Arizona State. That's the second half of the home and home with Arizona State from last year. Then they host Toledo. They host Florida. They have to go to Texas and to Georgia, back-to-back games. Have fun with that. Then they host Texas A&M, Arkansas, and UMass. Then they go to Tennessee, host Missouri, and go to Ole Miss. Rustin, what do you see for the Bulldogs in Mississippi State? And hey, shout out to all our friends from Mississippi State from last year. I'm sure you're going to love our predictions this year too. So it's good to see you guys who are joining in for this episode.
Oh my. All right. So last year we both predicted Mississippi State to go 4-8. They completely redeemed themselves and went 5-7. Just completely showed us up. They went out and got Jeff Lebby. That was a good move. Great hire.
Absolutely. Great hire.
Big fan of Jeff Lebby. But unfortunately, Jeff Lebby inherited the roster that was there, which was even worse than the roster that went 5-7 because a bunch of guys left or graduated. And unfortunately for all of our Hail State friends who I'm sure are going to hate this, I've got them going 4-8 because I don't think they have the depth to play with anyone in the SEC right now. So I've got them losing or winning their 4 non-conference games and losing every single SEC game.
That's exactly what I have to. It's a shame they didn't get to play Vandy this year. I would have picked them against Vandy, but they don't play Vandy this year.
And unfortunately, if they don't gel quickly, and I think their quarterback's a transfer from Baylor. He's run this system before. I think he can get them in enough situations that they can beat Arizona State in game 2. Mm-hmm. But I could even see them losing that one and going 3-9.
I totally agree. That is going to be a very, very good football game. And it's at Arizona State.
Yeah.
Literally the only reason I picked Mississippi State to beat Arizona State is because Jaden Rashada left. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
If Jaden Rashada were still the quarterback at Arizona State, I would have picked them to beat Mississippi State. Yeah. Sorry to all our Mississippi State friends, but I got you going 4-8 as well. And if we're both right, after week 3, they're going to be 3-0.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to be pumped up.
You'll be getting some votes for the top 25.
Yeah. And then they go Florida, at Texas, at Georgia. Whoops. So it's very, very quickly going to be 3-3 after that 3-0 start.
Yep.
Let's see. So Caleb Longcare said, at best, Mississippi State goes 5-7, worst 4-8. Yeah, I agree with that. At best, they go 5-7. At worst, they might be 3-9. I totally agree with that. Evan said 5-7. Yep, that's fair. I'd be curious to know who that other team is that they have them beating. Maybe Arkansas, that we have them losing to. Maybe they're picking them to beat Arkansas. Maybe A&M.
They're going to
certainly
start.
Nobody else on that.
This is how bad their depth was. They're going to try to run Josh Heupel's system. They're going to start 3 transfer wide receivers. One from Northwestern, the juggernaut that is Northwestern.
Well, they're known to throw the ball a whole lot at Northwestern.
Yeah. One from Tyler Community College and one from Jackson State. So their 3 starting wide receivers are all transfers, learning a brand new system, coming from three programs that have never seen SEC defensive backs. This is not going to go well.
Carl said maybe they'll have the Pirate watching out for them. Sam said Mississippi State's going to be interesting running the Jeff Lebby, Josh Heupel offense.
It's going to be unrecognizable.
He said they have Texas and Georgia back-to-back, both away games too. Like that's brutal at Texas and at Georgia. Carl said I'm more of a State fan than Ole Miss. I agree with that. Caleb said he thinks that they beat Texas A&M. That's their 5th win. That's fair. Absolutely. Totally fair. Going back to Ole Miss, Carl said, I know on paper Ole Miss should be good, but how well do they gel? Yeah, that's a fair question. That's a big part of it.
I would reply back and say, how well does any Lane Kiffin team gel? Like, he doesn't care. He's just going to call plays.
So we've gotten through both Mississippi schools. Now we turn our attention to Missouri. Missouri is the one. Go ahead.
This might be the weakest schedule in the entire conference right here.
Yeah. Carl said he would love it if Mississippi State beat Texas. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I would love it. I would love it if anybody beat Texas. But unfortunately, I just don't think it's going to happen very much. So Missouri, for those who are listening to the audio version of this, Missouri starts the season with 4 home games. They host Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vanderbilt. Powerhouse schedule right there. Then they have a bye week, and then they go to Texas A&M. Then they go to UMass, which is weird. Then they host Auburn. They go to Alabama. Then they have a bye week. They host Oklahoma. And then they go to South Carolina, to Mississippi State, and they host Arkansas. So really, the only 2 really difficult games is Alabama and Oklahoma, if we're being honest. Auburn might be tough, but really it's Alabama and Oklahoma. Those are really the only 2 difficult games on that schedule. Carl said Missouri has a Division II schedule. Yeah, I mean they're going to UMass, so kinda, yeah. Sam said this schedule looks very tough. I'm going to assume he's being sarcastic. Evan said 8-4. I would love to know, Evan, who you think the 4 losses are. I would love to know. Please put that in the comments.
I feel like the SEC made this schedule and they were almost done. They were like, oh crap, we gave Missouri the 7 worst teams in the conference. Throw Alabama on there.
Yeah. So what do you have for Missouri here? What do you think their record will be?
I've got them at 10-2, and I can't decide who the second one is. I don't like Oklahoma. I don't want to pick them. But I also know Drinkwitz always has at least one no-show in him every year. So I think it's either Oklahoma or Auburn. Again, I think Hugh Freeze is a really good coach. I think he's got a roster now that he likes and that he built. And the rest of the athletic department's mad because he spent all their money in NIL. So that tells me he's got dudes. So I could see Bama and Auburn winning back-to-back weeks there. I've got them at 10-2. Again, I'm not sure who the second one is, if it's Auburn or Oklahoma, but I've got them squarely at 10-2.
So let me start by saying I hate my prediction, just so we're all clear. Okay.
You're going to say 11-1.
I am not an Eli Drinkwitz fan. I was even more not a fan of his after he did that whole stupid statement on business comment. That's still the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard in my life. I am not a Drinkwitz fan. Unfortunately, Missouri has been given an absolute cupcake of a schedule. It is ridiculous how easy this schedule is. Because, like I said, there's really only 2 games on the whole schedule that you look at and be like, those are going to be the tough ones. That's not okay. This is just it's a bad schedule. Because of that, I have them going, unfortunately, 11-1 with their only loss at Alabama. That's the only loss. I think they're going to beat Oklahoma and Missouri. Missouri always has one game at home each year where they play really well and surprise somebody. Historically, it's been Georgia. They always have played Georgia well at home over the years. Why, I don't know, but that's the way it's been. I think they sneak up and beat Oklahoma, and unfortunately, I think they go 11-1. I hate to say that, but that's what I got. Some of the other comments that came through, Caleb Longcare said 9-3 losses to Auburn, Alabama, and Oklahoma. I think that's a very good prediction as well. That can 100% happen. Totally agree. Evan said 8-4. He said his 4 losses are Alabama, Oklahoma, Auburn, and Texas A&M. They do have to go to Texas A&M, so that could play to A&M's favor for sure. Listen, I just think athletically and offensively, Missouri's they're going to be good. I mean, they're just going to be good. That's the bottom line. Luther Burden Jr. is still coming back. They're going to be good. They're going to throw it around. Carl said 9-3. I hope so. He thinks that it could be even better than 9-3, but we're hoping for 9-3. Herb said 9-3. Sam said he was talking about Mississippi State's schedule being very tough. He said Missouri plays a weak schedule for sure. Missouri schedule is very weak. Sam said, can you imagine Drinkwitz going to Titletown and Tuscaloosa and winning? No, I don't want to. We will never hear the end of it, unfortunately, if that were to happen, and I don't want that to happen.
I do think the one weakness they have, or I shouldn't say weakness, the one unproven position they have is a key one. They were not comfortable with any of their depth at running back, and they went out and signed a transfer running back from Georgia State and a transfer running back from Appalachian State, neither of which were overly, they weren't workload guys for either of those schools, and they're listed as co-starters. So,
look what they did with Corey Schrader last year.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's unproven. I'm not going to say it's a weakness, but there's 2 guys there that no one knows if they're legitimately SEC players, and they haven't really shown anything at the Division I level that would say they are. So, Cody Schrader, at least when he transferred in, he had insane numbers. I mean, that's why they transferred him. These 2 guys don't, and they're listed as co-starters. So if Missouri has to become one-dimensional, and has to just become a pass-only offense. Remember, Blake Baker's not here anymore to save them on defense. This defense lost a lot of guys, and they lost the guy in Blake Baker. So you got a brand new defensive coordinator. He's coming from South Alabama, so he's never really seen SEC athletes. I think there's some holes here. I think there's some things that are going to be a little different than last year.
I hope so, because I don't want them to go 11-1. Tony said Missouri 9-3, losses to Alabama, Texas A&M, and either Oklahoma or Auburn. I think that's a good prediction too. I think that's really fair because, basically what he's saying is the two tough away games they're going to lose, but then they'll win one of two tough home games. And I think that's a great prediction. Carl said it'll be 3 years before we get to see Drinking Schmitz again. Yeah, unfortunately, we got to wait to beat him again. Evan said Drinkwitz is overhyped. Pride will come back to bite him. I mean, I'm just not going to say anything because my mom taught me that if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all. So, just not a fan of that guy. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. So you had them going 10-2, correct?
Yep.
All right. And so I've got them going 11-1. So as of this moment, you've got Georgia in the lead at 12-0 and Ole Miss at 11-1 right behind them. And then Alabama and Missouri both at 10-2. That's your standings so far.
I don't know how they're going to choose the SEC championship because in my final numbers, I've got Georgia.
Hang on. Don't give it away.
Well, no, I was just going to say I've got Georgia at 12-0, which I've already said, and then I've got 3 teams at 11-1. So I don't know how they're going to decide who goes to the SEC championship.
Yep. Amen. I'm glad you said that because that's going to be something fun to talk about here in a second. Caleb said, when are you going to do the in-depth Tennessee schedule like last year? I think in about 3 schools from now. So you're at the right place at the right time, buddy. Next up, we got Oklahoma, where the wind goes blowing. I can't remember the rest of the words. Something about the plains. So Oklahoma, this is a really difficult one to read as well. So I will tell everybody what it says. Oklahoma starts the season with 4 home games. They host Temple, Houston, Tulane, and then they start SEC play against the Big Orange Volunteers. After that, they go to Auburn. Then they host Texas A&M. Excuse me. No, I'm sorry. That's totally wrong. It's the Red River Rivalry. That's hard to say. Red River Rivalry. There we go. Versus Texas and Dallas. Then they host South Carolina. They have to go to Ole Miss. They host Maine. I hear Maine's going to be a powerhouse this year. And then they go to Missouri. They host Alabama. And then they finish the season at LSU. So, honestly, that's a pretty tough entrance into the SEC right there. They got some tough games on that schedule. What do you think happens with Oklahoma first year in the SEC?
So after I get done with this, the Oklahoma fans are going to find this video and they're going to be this year's Mississippi State fans. I'm not a believer. I see a lot of issues. Brent Venables, I'll just start at the top. Brent Venables is a defensive guy. As much as he wants to say he's hands off with the offense, he's a defensive guy. He went out and hired an offensive coordinator in Seth Littrell that is a dyed-in-the-wool air raid guy. He is a Mike Leach disciple. He has run the air raid everywhere he's been. Defensive guys get on the headset and say over and over, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. It's just what defensive guys do. Seth Littrell is not going to run the ball. He is an air raid guy through and through. So there's going to be immediate friction there. The other issue is 6 of their 11 starters on offense are transfers. So the five returning starters ran the old system last year. Now they're going to be learning the air raid, which is different than what they were running. They have 5 brand new offensive linemen, 4 of which weren't even on campus last year. They're starting 4 transfers out of their 5. You've got wide receivers who have never run this system before, and it's different. Like people think it's easy. Oh, there's only so many plays. It's very different. It's hard to understand when you're first learning it. So there's going to be a learning curve there, which is why I'm glad Tennessee gets them early. You're going to see it. They're not going to look good against Tennessee. They're going to struggle. And then defensively, Brent Venables felt that their defense lacked or lost so much that they went out and got a ton of defensive transfers. Right now on defense, they're planning to start 4 transfers in the front 7. Okay, so 4 guys who have never run their system in the front 7. On the second 12 or second 11, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So on defense, 8 of their top 22 are transfers. Okay, that means he was not thrilled with their depth. But there's one that I'm going to single out specifically. He's going to play the nickel, which means he's going to end up covering Tennessee slot guys. Squirrel White, I'm going to go ahead and call it right now. Squirrel White's going to have a real big game against Oklahoma because Oklahoma's starting nickel last year, and this is not made up, this is real. He played at Northeast Oklahoma A&M College. Northeast Oklahoma A&M College. That's like 7 letters in the acronym.
I hear they have a really good program.
Yeah. We're all huge fans of of Northeast Oklahoma A&M College. Yeah, that's how bad they got. They had to go find a dude at that school, and he's going to start. I'm not a believer. They're going to have to prove to me they can play. I think there's going to be major issues. And because of that, I've got Oklahoma going 7-5, losing to Tennessee, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, and LSU.
All right. So let me say this to begin with, and I think you're right. This is going to be the Oklahoma fans' favorite video over the next few days when I release them one at a time. I could see a scenario where Oklahoma goes 6-6, losing to the 5 schools you had plus Missouri. It could happen. However, I'm going to say Oklahoma goes 8-4. And I think that just like you said, they struggle closer to the first half of the season because everybody's new. Like including some of the coaches, like everybody's new. And so I think they struggle a little bit at the beginning and they finish the season strong. So this is going to sound crazy, but I think their 4 losses are to Tennessee and Texas because that's the first half of the season. Ole Miss because Ole Miss is just going to be better. They lose at Missouri. They go to Missouri. Missouri always has one game. They always have one game at home where they play better than they should and they beat somebody. And then they're sitting there 6-4, and Brent Venables does something because he's a great coach and lots of fire under him, and they beat Bama at home after the bye week because they get a bye week before Bama. So they beat Bama, and then they go to LSU and shock the world and beat LSU. So they finish the season strong. So they go 8-4.
You and I have a very different opinion of Brent Venables. I think Brent Venables is the stereotypical fantastic defensive coordinator, terrible head coach. I don't see him being a good CEO. I think he's a fantastic defensive play caller. I think he might be one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. But he's going to have to prove to me that he can be a head coach. I just don't see it.
Evan said bold take. Yeah, I know it's bold. I know it is.
By the way, the Northeastern Oklahoma A&M College are the Norse, N-O-R-S-E, Norse.
Hey, that's like the dudes that came to the 4 seed in the Knoxville Regional this year. Who was that?
Northern
Northern
Kentucky.
Kentucky? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Evan said they're going 9-3. They're going to lose to Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss.
Evan, there is no way Tennessee's losing to that team early in the year. I'm just going to tell you right now, Squirrel White is going to have a career day on that poor kid from Northeastern Oklahoma A&M College. Whoever thought it was going to be a good idea to sign that kid?
NEOAMC.
Yes, the Norse.
NEOAMC, 6 letters.
Whoever thought it was a good idea to sign that kid and think he was going to cover slot guys in the SEC? No, not happening.
Caleb said 8-4 losses to what? I love it. Losses to Texas, Bama, Tennessee, and Tulane, baby. The Green Wave. Hey, it's the beginning of the season, so maybe so.
My favorite part about this kid, the Oklahoma Athletics website got lazy and they didn't want to write out all of that, so it just says Neo A&M College.
NEOAMC.
Mm-hmm.
Herb said 6-6 or 7-5 at best. Carl said, great take, Rustin, on the Sooners. Caleb said Tennessee's going to score 70 plus. And Nico has over 400 yards passing. Sign me up. I would love that. I don't think they're going to score more than 70 points on him, but that you got to remember that's Nico's first true road game.
Yeah.
And
I would predict that's going to be, you're going to see a steady dose that game. Because again, 4 of their front 7 are transfers. So I would predict Dylan Sampson's going to have a big game and Squirrel White's going to have a big game because he's got the poor kid from Northeast Oklahoma A&M College on him. well,
and here's the thing: it's going to take a minute for Nico to adjust to that environment because, Russ and I were both at the 2015 Oklahoma game in Neyland, and I'll give their band credit. They tick me off, but they intentionally just hold out a really long, loud note right up until the ball snapped. And they stopped playing it right before that ball snapped. Combine that with all the screaming fans. I mean, it's gonna be an adjustment for Nico for sure. Sam said Oklahoma beat Texas last year. That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
And
Caleb said,
a lot of that team is gone. Like
that's true.
This is not the same
now
team.
At Oregon. Caleb Longcare said Brent is Derek Dooley head coach. I don't know if he's quite that bad.
We're gonna find out.
Carl said, "Can you imagine putting the school on your jersey, Northeast Missouri State A&M?"
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it probably just says Neo.
Sam said, "Caleb, was Derek Dooley ever good at coaching anything?" Rustin said he was a rock star as Des Bryant's babysitter. Let's see. Evan said Texas has better depth this year than they did last year.
They're loaded.
So differing opinions on Oklahoma there for sure. Probably not differing opinions on our next team, and that's South Carolina. Side note, the Missouri graphic was from KAIT Channel 8 News. And the Oklahoma one was from Oklahoma's football Twitter. So South Carolina, this graphic comes from Sports News and Scores Facebook page. Let's see. Oklahoma hosts Old Dominion to start the season. Then they immediately go to Kentucky the very next week. Then they go, let's see. They host LSU. They host Akron and Ole Miss. Then they have to go to Alabama and to Oklahoma in back-to-back weeks. That's going to be tough. Then they host A&M. Then they have to go to Vanderbilt. They host Missouri, host Wofford, and then finish the season at Clemson. What do you got for South Carolina, Rustin?
Where to start? So I think Shane Beamer's going to be squarely on the hot seat. I think they've got depth issues on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. I mean, their number 4 wide receiver is a converted quarterback. There's some issues. I do like the fact they went out and got Rocket Sanders to start at running back. That was a good get. That will help them. They went and got Oscar Attaway as their backup. He's from North Texas. It'll be interesting to see how he fits into that system because he was playing for Seth Littrell in the air raid. And South Carolina is definitely not running the air raid. So I'm not real sure how he's going to fit in. I think it's going to be the Rocket Sanders show. They're going to run his legs off. But there's issues at wide receiver. Nick Harbor has not panned out to be the second coming that they all made him out to be. They're starting Lenoris Sellers as a redshirt freshman at quarterback. There's going to be issues there. His backup's Robbie Ashford, who left Auburn. If Lenoris Sellers goes down, Robbie Ashford's not a good backup. That's going to be problems. Defensively, they've got a ton of new starters. I'm not sold that this roster can hold up in the SEC. So I've got them at 5-7. I've got them losing. They also have a difficult schedule. I've got them losing to Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Missouri, and Clemson. And I could even see them losing to A&M and maybe finishing as badly as 4-8.
So I have them going 4-8, and the only wins I have are Old Dominion, Akron, Vanderbilt, and Wofford. And here's the thing: Wofford's pretty good, but I think that South Carolina will beat them. But I don't see them beating anybody else. Yeah, they'll beat Vandy, but they're not going to beat Clemson, especially at Clemson. That's not going to happen. So I have them going 4-8. To your credit, they do get to host A&M, so that's good for them. But I just don't.
That's the only reason why I had them beating A&M was because it was at Columbia.
Yeah, that's going to be a really rough year for the Gamecocks, in my opinion. Evan said he thinks they go 6-6. Carl said 5-7, and Shane Beamer gets fired before Billy Napier does.
Possible.
Herb said 5-7 at best. Caleb said 5-7 with losses to Kentucky, LSU, and Ole Miss. Oh, here's the rest of them: Bama, Oklahoma, and Clemson, and Tennessee.
The only reason I picked Kentucky to beat them was because it is so early in the season, and Lenoris Sellers is still going to be figuring out the offense. Like he's not ready for this, and so at Kentucky early in the season, that's not a recipe for success for a young quarterback trying to figure things out.
South Carolina got a couple of great young offensive linemen from Sam there. Carl said South Carolina beats Missouri on special teams because of Shane Beamer. I think Missouri is going to beat – personally, I think Missouri will beat South Carolina by like 40 points. That is not a good matchup for South Carolina. Let's see. I could be wrong, though. Going back to Texas, Sam said Texas has great depth and a parking lot full of Lamborghinis. That's true. There's video evidence of that now. That's a good point. So you had 5-7. I had 4-8. All right. So now let's go to the Big Orange, and for this one I want to do game by game, and thank you to Tennessee Football Twitter account for this graphic. I want to go game by game. We'll give our prediction for each one. Starting the season off against UTC, I mean, that's a win, right? You want to say anything about that one?
No, definitely a win.
Second game of the season, fun game here, in my opinion. Neutral site game against NC State. Should be a lot of fun. I think they get the win. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a game. I'm not. I'm not impressed with this roster. I think our defensive line wreaks havoc on this team. They're going to be starting on their offensive line. They're going to be starting four new starters. Four new starters against our defensive line does not spell a good day for you.
Agreed.
So I think this is going to be a. I think this is going to be a beatdown.
Then let's see here. Week 3 or the third game is a home game against Kent State. I mean W, right? Anything to say about that?
No.
All right. Now, fourth game of the season at Oklahoma. First true road game for Nico. How do you see it going down?
I said it a minute ago. Dylan Sampson and Squirrel White. I think we're going to see those two guys have big days. And I'm not so sure this is going to be a close game. Oklahoma's going to have to prove to me that they've brought all this together because there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of new guys trying to learn these systems.
So I'm glad that this game is at the beginning of the season because Oklahoma is still going to be figuring out a whole lot of stuff. They're all going to be getting used to each other still. I'm glad that's the case. Otherwise, I'd be really concerned about this, and partly because it is Nico's first true road game. I mean, when he played in the bowl game against Iowa, I mean, that crowd was easily over 50% Tennessee fans. It's also going to be way louder in Norman than it was in the bowl game against Iowa. So I think Tennessee's offensive style and the fact that they go so fast will help him not be will help him be less impacted by the crowd noise because it's just a let's go get it that kind of thing. But I also think that the in-ear communication, this is what time when it could help him because Heupel can be talking to him without the, I mean, he can hear the guy in his ear no matter how loud it is in the stadium. So that's going to be helpful in that game. So I do think it's very close. I could even see an overtime win, but I do think Tennessee wins that game.
The other thing I would say here, we've already said it. Oklahoma's going to have 5 new starters on the offensive line. The 3 games before this are Temple, Houston, and Tulane. Okay. I think those 5 new offensive linemen, let's be real, Temple, Houston, and Tulane are not going to put pressure on them.
Yeah, they're not going to see anything like Tennessee's defensive line.
Right. So I think those 3 games could actually create a false sense of security for them. And they're going to show up and see Omari Thomas and some of those guys and be like, did these dudes eat the Tulane defensive linemen? Like, where'd this come from?
Omar Norman Lott, James Pierce Jr.
Yeah. Elijah Simmons. I think our defensive line is going to live in that backfield during that game.
So coming off that game, we have a bye week, and then we go right back out in the same direction geographically to Arkansas. Now, historically, we all know Tennessee Arkansas is always a good game. I mean, what was it? 8 overtimes, 6 overtimes? I can't remember if that was a decade ago now, but
yeah,
it's always a good game. When I first looked at this schedule, I was like, they're going to lose one of those 2 games, back-to-back road games, but I really don't think they're going to lose to Oklahoma. And Josh Heupel has proven over and over that his teams are really, really good coming off a bye week. We've seen that now repeatedly, even while he's been at Tennessee. So it's hard to not pick Tennessee against Arkansas, and I think they beat Arkansas. What do you think?
I don't think this is close. I think Arkansas is really bad. I don't see this being a game at all. I mean, Sam Pittman's already squarely on the hot seat, and this season hadn't even started. I don't see this being close.
They come back home the very next week. We have a night game against Florida. That'll be fun. Hadn't had that in a while. Have a night game against Florida with a Manning cast going. It's going to be such a fun game. And gosh, I just really don't like Florida. Like I want them to beat them by like 30 something points. I don't think it'll be that much. I think they beat Florida. Listen, it's always a tough game against Florida. As long as they win, I'm happy. But I do think it'll be probably like a 7 or 10 point victory at least. I'd really like it for it to be a 14 to 17 point victory. But I do think they beat Florida. But it'll be a tough game because it's Florida. What do you think?
I think it'll be a tough game early, but I mean we've talked about it repeatedly. Florida's playing a horrific schedule. Their defense is not going to be good. They're just going to be really bad. So I could see them keeping it close early, but I think over the course of the game we pull away and probably win pretty handedly.
And then the third Saturday in October. This is the game that if I had done this show yesterday, I would have said Tennessee goes 10-2, and this would have been my other loss. But I don't know, man. It's just as I was making out my notes here. I was looking at this one. I was like, sometimes you just get a feeling. You just get a feeling, and specifically, I like Josh Heupel against Kalen DeBoer. I like that matchup. So I'm picking Tennessee in a very, very close game to beat Alabama on the third Saturday in October.
Yeah, I think we outscore them. I think it'll be a very good game. I think we just have more offense than they do, and I think we can pretty much match them defensively, and then it's just a matter of outscoring them.
The next week we got a bye week, and then we host Kentucky coming off of a bye week. No chance for Kentucky. We win that game coming off a bye week.
I'm not concerned about Kentucky at all this year. I think they're very down. I don't think they can score with us. I don't think they can stop us defensively. I think our defense is going to give them fits. This one doesn't concern me at all.
Very next week, we host Mississippi State. I would expect to see a lot of quick slants and stuff like that from Mississippi State just to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands because our defensive line is going to live in that backfield. Yeah. That will not be a fun game for their running backs or their quarterback. That is not going to be a fun game for Mississippi State. I think we beat Mississippi State pretty handily, actually.
Yeah. If they want to avoid it being really cold, they could go ahead and move homecoming up to November 9th. It's not going to be a game.
Then we go to Georgia. I just don't think we can beat them. I think it'll be. Now I will say this: at this point, both of us are predicting them to be undefeated. We've already said that Georgia will be undefeated, and so both teams going into this game would be 9-0. So it is very possible, if that's the case, it is very possible that you're looking at once again a number 1 versus number 2 type game. The college football playoff rankings will be released by this point as well. 2 years ago, this was the first ever number 1 versus number 1 game. Tennessee was number 1 college football playoff ranking. Georgia was number 1 in the AP poll. So I don't think that'll be the case. I think Georgia will probably be number 1 in both. But because Georgia will have already beaten Texas, Alabama, somebody else that was a huge name too by this point. Maybe Ole Miss, maybe that's who it was. So, Georgia probably going to be walking into that game number 1, but there is a chance that Tennessee could be number 2 at this point because Texas would have already been beaten by Georgia at this point. So very well could be number 1 versus number 2, but I think Georgia beats them, especially at Sanford Stadium.
Yeah. I think that's the difference is in Athens. I think they're both pretty equal. I think Georgia's a little deeper, and I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a very close game. I think it'll probably come down to which defense plays the best. I think both offenses will score. But because it is in Athens, and again, I picked Georgia to win the whole thing, so I'm going to stick with them for this one.
And then UTEP hosting them the next week, and then they finish the season at Vandy. I mean, both those games are going to be blowouts.
Yeah, not close.
So, I think it's important to say I don't think people know what Tennessee has at the offensive skill positions. I just don't think they know. At running back, for example, all people are thinking about is Dylan Sampson. Listen, Dylan Sampson's a phenomenal running back. He's, I think, the all-time leading rusher in high school in the state of Louisiana. The guy is a fantastic running back, but he is not the only guy we got back there. They're 5 deep in the running back room. They have a lot of talent back there that's just waiting to hey, how can we get the ball in their hands kind of situation. That's going to be a phenomenal group. Wide receiver, the only person, maybe 2 that I've heard talking about it was the Josh Pickle, or JD Pickle, what's his name? Is it JD Pickle for 247 or On 3, whoever?
Yeah.
He's the only guy that I've heard talk about. Oh, it's Josh Pate and JD Pickle. That's what it is.
Right.
So JD Pickle, he's the only guy who's talked about Tennessee's depth at wide receiver. Josh Pate mentioned it a little bit in one of his videos, but people just aren't talking about that. They have more depth. Let's be clear. This is the best roster Josh Heupel has had since he's been at Tennessee. Look at what he did in 2022. This is his best roster. Now, granted, he had Hendon Hooker in 2022. But in theory, he's got an even more talented guy right now in Nico Iamaleava. He just doesn't have the experience as Hendon Hooker yet. So
we do have to put a big asterisk next to that 11-1, because there is one position that we don't have depth, and that's quarterback. If Nico goes down,
line.
Yeah, I think we're better there than people realize. If Nico goes down, we're an 8-14.
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely. So assuming everyone stays healthy, it is really hard not to like this Tennessee team.
Yeah.
And I just don't think people know what they have. And I think that's why Heupel and company were strategically very quiet in the media days. Some of the comments that came through about Tennessee season, Caleb said 12-0. I love it. That's great. Carl, 12-0. He says Nico has the Heisman won by week 9. This is a totally unbiased opinion. I love it. That's great. Carl said Heupel will call off the dogs on Oklahoma in the 4th, up by 24. Oh, man, I hope. That'd be amazing. Keg 2071 said, go Big Orange. Absolutely. Tony said, if we win the first 6 games, we're 10-2 at worst. I 100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. Let's see. Keg said that Oklahoma better have their big boy drawers on for sure. No doubt. I like this pick, Carl. Carl said Boo Carter pick 6 against OU. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. Carl said he agreed about, Josh Heupel against Kalen DeBoer. He said you've got Josh Heupel in year 4 going up against Kalen DeBoer in year 1. And that's a very good point. Very good point. Sam said a couple of those guys that were in our secondary last year are going to be starting for Arkansas. Expect our receivers to have a day. That's a great point, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point. Fantastic point. He said Nico needs to demonstrate his passing skills early in the season. I agree with that. Give other teams something to think about, because let's be honest, we didn't see that. He didn't have to do it a lot against Iowa. He just destroyed him with his feet in that game. So if he shows off the arm talent early, that's given defensive play callers even more to think about as they're preparing for Tennessee. Let's see. Carl said, Evan. So yeah, they're saying there's a chance. I always go into Georgia week. Going this year is the year. Hey, I love it, man. Absolutely. This is the year, right? This is it. This is it. Let's see. Green Wave says JD Pickle. Yep. Jim, welcome, Jim. Good to have you. He said 11-1 or 10-2. Totally agree. Green Wave said 10-2 would be fine with me. 11-1 would be insane. I totally agree. And he said, hey, if Nico goes down, I trust in Gaston and Merck. No one throws like Gaston. No one,
it's
Gaston
Gaston.
can sling it.
It's Gaston, and it ain't gonna be Merck. Merklinger is not ready. And that's
Gaston can sling it.
Yeah, but
I mean, he's not Nico, but he can sling it.
Yeah. We would have to find out how good of a play caller Josh Heupel really is at that moment.
Carl gave us $10 because I said we had a chance. I agree, Carl. We do have a chance. I just don't know how big of a chance it is, but absolutely. So you're telling me there's a chance. I love it, man. Hey, thank you so much, Carl, for that super chat. You're the man. Thank you so much. Let's see. Tony said our offensive line depth is a concern. Mays and Spraggins both were injured last season. Got to stay healthy there. Totally agree. The one guy that we cannot lose is Cooper Mays. Can't lose him. He's got to stay healthy.
Yeah, I think it's going to be better than it was last year. When you listen to Glenn Ellerby and other people around the program talk about offensive line, they're very positive. Last year they were very quiet. So the fact that they're talking about them means they're confident and comfortable with them. So, I think we're going to be better there than what we have been.
Fort Rev 1 said, I talked with Cam. He said he should have an update by the end of the month on when he could possibly be back. Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. Jim said we win by 10 or more over the Gators. Man, I hope so. I hope so. Sam said, with these schedules, injuries are going to play a part for all teams. 100%. Totally agree with that. Herb said, quiet before the SEC media days, then the Great Awakening. Man, I'd love it. I would love it. Absolutely. Keg said 9-3, drop Georgia and Bama, then a flyer. And 9-3 is the floor. Yeah, I mean, I agree. When you first look at that schedule, you think, all right, they lose Georgia and Bama, and then probably either Oklahoma or Arkansas. But that Arkansas game, they're coming off a bye week. That's huge. And Oklahoma, it's early in the season for them. And I think that's why Tennessee might have the edge there. But I agree with you. 9-3 is definitely the floor. Caleb said if Tennessee goes 10-2, they're getting into the playoffs. Maybe. That's a good question. It depends on who the two losses are, I guess, and how well the other teams are playing that those two losses have come from. But I'm glad you said that because we're about to talk about the last couple games here and our last couple teams. And I think it's going to be interesting when we show like how many teams are in the set really tied for second in the SEC. Carl said Gaston won the orange and white game. Yeah, he did. Jim said 10-2 gets a home playoff game. I don't think so. Because in order to have a home playoff game, first of all, let's think about this. The 4 Power 5 or 4 Power 4 conference champions all get a home playoff game immediately. So there goes 4 of the spots right there. Then you've only got what? 2 more? So you're looking at all these teams that could be 11-1. They would get the home playoff games. In order to get a home playoff game, you have to be at least 11-1, at least, because there's just going to be too many teams that are going to be fighting for those last 2 home playoff game spots. Because, like I said, the top 4 teams, they get them immediately. Or not the top 4. That's incorrect. The 4 conference champions, they get 4 guaranteed 4 of the 6 home playoff games. So Like, yeah, you got to be 11-1 at least to get a home playoff game. Tony said, I hope the man-child Bruce stays healthy. Absolutely. For his sake, I hope he does too. Absolutely. Carl said, having an elite left guard strengthens the whole line. We need one.
It's either going to be
position.
Yeah, it's either going to be Jackson Lampley or Andre Carrick. It'll be one or the other.
Sam said nobody knows the capabilities of these new running backs. Cam Seldon and the Virginia kid, Peyton Lewis. I agree. You know, you got Cam Seldon, you got Peyton Lewis, but listen, you got Deshaun Bishop back there, and you've also got Khalifa Keith. I mean, they're 5 deep at running back, legit 5 deep. So I don't think Peyton Lewis sees the field this year.
No.
I mean, he's just going to be buried on the depth chart.
Yeah,
I think he'll redshirt this season. And listen, even if he redshirts, that means he could still potentially get in 4 games. But I don't think he will. I think you're going to see Dylan Sampson, Cam Seldon, Deshaun Bishop, and Khalifa Keith. I think those are the 4 guys that you're going to see all year.
And they like to shorten it to 3. Like you'll see Khalifa Keith and mop up, but it's going to be Sampson, Seldon, and Bishop.
Just a man in Tennessee said, Vols haven't beaten Arkansas and Fayetteville since 2001. We can't sleep on them. I don't care how bad they are. 100% agree. It's always a good game. Always. I just like the fact that it is coming off a bye week. But I think that's a fantastic point. Absolutely. Keck said 11-1 is the only chance we have to make it. We're the Vols. They will not put us in at 10-2. I mean, that's also fair.
Well, I think the bigger issue is if you look at all my final standings, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 SEC teams at 10-2 or better. The issue isn't whether Tennessee's 10-2. The issue is, will the committee honestly put the best 12 teams in? Because if they will legitimately put the best 12 teams in, are they going to put 7 SEC schools in the 12? And I think that's where the problems come in, and that's where 10-2 is actually an issue. Like you almost have to be 11-1 in the SEC if you're going to for sure get in the playoffs.
So Green Wave said top 4 get a bye. That would be the 4 conference champions, and then 5 through 8 get a home game. So there'd be 4 home games with those teams. So that's a good point. So there would be the conference champion. If we don't make that's the SEC champion. That's gone. So you're really looking at 4 spots. I mean, it would be, unless a lot of parity happens, 10-2 probably would not get a home game because you also got to remember.
For clarity, the top 4 don't get a home game. They get a bye. And the next round are bowl games. So they don't actually get a home game.
We also have to remember, Just a Man in Tennessee said, no, we'll be ranked in the top 12 at 10-2. I agree with that. I mean, we probably would be, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're getting into the playoff if you're ranked in the top 12. Because one of the spots in the playoff is reserved for the highest ranked non-Power 4 school.
Yeah.
So really, it's just go ahead.
The worst place to be is number 12. Nobody wants to be number 12. Number 12 ain't getting in.
Yeah, for sure you're not getting in. And it is possible that number 11 might not even get in if, I mean, let's look at last year. What if something crazy had happened and Iowa upset Michigan in the Big Ten championship game? Iowa would have been ranked outside the top 12, but they would have gotten a bye in this year's tournament. Michigan wouldn't have fallen out of the top 12, so they would have still been in. But even though Iowa was ranked outside the top 12, they would have gotten a spot. So now number 12 and number 11 weren't getting in the playoff in that scenario. So to really be comfortable about your spot in the playoff, you really have to be at number 10 or higher. Number 11 is treading on thin ice. Number 12, you're not in. You're just not, because the highest ranked non-Power 4 school will have that spot. Keg said we're going 12-1, so he's saying we're winning the SEC championship game. Tony said 5 through 8 teams get a home playoff game. Oh, Carl said he meant
Left
tackle, not left guard.
And that's Lance Hurd.
That's Lance Hurd. You're exactly right. Keg said 12-1 or 11-2 SEC champs for a home game. That's cool with me. I'd love that. That'd be awesome. Tony said the top 4 teams do not get a home game. That will be bowl games. Yep, he's exactly right. Tony made another really good point. He said if Notre Dame wins 10, they'll put them in the playoffs. That's exactly right. So that would take up another spot right there. And they're not even in a conference. So that's a good point. Greenwave said, I'll be surprised if more than 5 SEC teams get in. Notre Dame will get in, plus the Group 5 champion. Big Ten will likely get 3 teams in. Sam said, so Rustin, how do you see things going if it comes down to a pick between Tennessee and Alabama?
Well, the good news is Nick Saban's gone.
Head to head.
Yeah, I mean, head to head would be the first thing, and I think we're going to beat them. But the good news is Nick Saban's gone, so that whole politicking angle is out. Head to head, obviously they would go with us first, unless we lose if we're both 10-2 and we lose a weird one to somebody we shouldn't. I think this year more than any other in the past, strength of schedule is finally going to really matter. I think they're really going to have to look at overall strength of schedule. So how everybody else does will really play into what we do.
Just a man in Tennessee said, I think pigs would have grown wings and started flying over Knoxville if Iowa had beaten Michigan with Deacon Hill. I totally agree. I was just given a hypothetical scenario that it is possible that 11 and 12 won't get in. It is possible. We know 12's not getting in, but 11 is treading on thin ice, like I said. Greenwave said, is Saban really gone, though? That's a fair question.
So the only good story I heard from SEC Media Days was probably the funniest one, and it was about Nick Saban. And he has a personal assistant that Alabama assigned to him. And the night before SEC Media Day started, Saban called him and said, here's my available time slots, and then informed him that he needed to schedule all 16 head coaches in one of these time slots. It's the night before. Like, the media scrambles just to get any of those head coaches consistently on. Nick Saban gave him specific time slots and said, put them on these slots. Now, what I want to know, out of the 16, 1 refused. 15 complied and signed up for one of his time slots. 1 said no. I am dying to know who the one was that said, nope, not doing it.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on and finish these out here. We got Texas up next. Rustin, what do you have for Texas? For those listening to the audio version, Texas hosts Colorado State. Then they go to Michigan. That'll be a big time games, week 2 there. Then they host Texas San Antonio, host Louisiana Monroe. Then they host Mississippi State. So 4 of their first 5 games are at home. Then they play Oklahoma coming off a bye week. Then they host Georgia. They're hosting all these games apparently. But then they have to go to Vanderbilt. So that'll be a really tough road match. Then they host Florida. They go to Arkansas. They host Kentucky, and they finish at Texas A&M. Listen, that is a very favorable schedule because they host pretty much everybody.
Yeah, I've got them at 11-1, losing to Georgia, and that's it.
I have the exact same thing. Literally the exact same thing. I think that week 2 game at Michigan is going to be hilarious. I think they're going to beat Michigan pretty soundly.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very, very funny. Justin Man in Tennessee said Nick Saban has been screwing the Vols over since 2001 SEC championship game. Yes, he has. Caleb said he bets it's Kirby. That told him no.
So it definitely wasn't Kirby, because in one of his press conferences at media days, he talked about he had just come from an interview with Coach Saban. So it wasn't Kirby. I'm guessing it's Hugh Freeze, but I would love to know for sure.
Caleb said 10-2 for Texas, losses to Michigan and Georgia. Carl said could have been Lane Kiffin for the ultimate troll and Nick. Nah, Lane's got his. Well, I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, he holds Nick Saban in very high regard.
Yeah. Just a Man in Tennessee said Texas might go 11-1, but man, 9-3 and a slice of humble pie for Texas fans would be glorious. Totally agree. Amen. Yep. They think they're coming in this scene running the show. Yeah, I would love to see them lose multiple games, just so people can do the horns down and just tick them all off. That'd be awesome.
They don't have an overly difficult schedule. I mean, that Michigan team is way down. This is not the same Michigan from last year. Oklahoma's questionable. Florida's bad. Arkansas, by that point, Sam Pittman may be fired. Kentucky's terrible. A&M, who knows what they're going to be by that time in the season. It's not an overly difficult schedule.
All right, so let's go to our next one here. We got Texas A&M. Texas A&M starts the season out hosting Notre Dame. That's going to be a pretty cool game. Then they host McNeese State, go to Florida, host Bowling Green, Arkansas, they play Arkansas in a neutral site game in Arlington, Texas.
Yeah.
Then they host Missouri. Then they go to Mississippi State, host LSU, go to South Carolina, host New Mexico State, go to Auburn. And this screenshot came from Texags on Twitter, and they did TU in lowercase letters. They didn't even capitalize it and didn't put UT. They put TU at the bottom for Texas. They host Texas to end the season. So what do you think about and Texas's schedule came from sbsschedules.com. So what do you think about Texas A&M's season here?
I like Mike Elko. He's a good coach, but the cupboard is bare. He inherited a terrible roster, tons of guys left. He wasn't able to replace a whole lot. They're learning 2 brand new systems on offense and defense. It's just not going to be a good year for them. They've got to retool the roster. I've got them going 4-8, and if they lose at South Carolina, I could even see them being 3-9.
Wow, man!
They're just not. They don't have anything. I mean, they inherited an awful roster that just isn't. There's nothing there.
Now, this is now the last year's Mississippi State video.
Yep.
So hello to all the fans in College Station that just joined our show. when they see this snippet of the video here. Nice to have you all. We're the Vol Bros. I have them going 7-5 with losses to Notre Dame, Florida, Missouri, LSU, and Texas. So I think that's a fair.
I'm sorry. I don't see Mike Elko going into Auburn and beating Hugh Freeze. Not with that roster.
I mean, that was a toss-up in my opinion. That was a tough one. Man, that's an interesting one there. Caleb said 4-8. Green Wave said, love how they have Texas listed as TU. Carl said 7-5 based on Elko being an elite coach.
I agree. Mike Elko is a fantastic coach, but I would just encourage you, check out their roster. Look at how many guys are brand new. Look how many guys are transferred. I mean, on defense, they're starting 6 transfers on defense. And they're 2 deep. They have 11 of their 22 on their 2 deep or transfers. So they're all learning a brand new system on offense. I mean, like when you look at their offensive roster, I mean, there's just nothing there. I mean,
Yep.
they got a ton of recruiting to do.
So Sam said on that Texas schedule one, there was a buy tickets button for the Michigan game. He said, but you can buy tickets for the Texas Michigan game. Yeah, I don't know why that one was the only one that had it. That was pretty good. Just a Man in Tennessee said, every year we hear how loaded A&M is and it never materializes. That's true. Carl said, but Elko does have better talent to work with than he did at Duke. That is also true.
Yes, but no depth. I mean, they're an injury away at every position from being absolutely awful.
Just a Man in Tennessee said Mississippi State stinks. By the way, can we get into another fight with their fans? I think we will actually, because Rustin and I, didn't you pick 4-8 as well for them?
Yep.
Yeah, so did I. So we both picked 4-8, and I said it very easily could be 3-9. Rustin agreed with Arizona State there at the beginning. So, we might actually made a lot of new friends at Mississippi State again this year. Carl said, didn't know roster was that bad because of high recruiting. Welcome Heath, good to have you. He said they don't call it recruiting, it's called NIL.
Yeah, they all left. Like all those guys that Jimbo Fisher brought in and paid obscene amounts of money, they're all gone.
So that'll be a good one. That'll be a good one for the rest of the season. We'll see how they do and which one of us was closer to their record. All right, our last one. We saved the best for last. Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt, tough schedule for Vandy. They start the season playing Virginia Tech, and then they got Alcorn State. They go to Georgia State. They got Missouri after that. They host Alabama. They go to Kentucky. So they got to go to Missouri and then to Kentucky on either side of that hosting Alabama game. Then they get a little bit of respite and they play Ball State. Then they host Texas. Then they go to Auburn, host South Carolina, go to LSU, and then host Tennessee. How many wins do you see on this for Vanderbilt?
Well, somebody needs to educate the athletic director at Vanderbilt that you're allowed 4 non-conference games in the SEC, and you're supposed to schedule 4 wins when you coach at Vanderbilt. Scheduling Virginia Tech was a really bad move. I see them going 3-9.
So I have them going 2-10.
You think Georgia State's going to get them too?
I think they are. I have Georgia State beating them at Georgia State. I think they lose that game.
I could see it.
And because it's a weird environment. You're going into with an old Turner Field, so it's not even a football stadium.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a weird feeling anyway. And I think Georgia State beats them. So I got them going 2-10 with their only wins against Alcorn State and Ball State. That's it. That's tough. That's tough sledding there for them. Just a Man in Tennessee said 0-12. I like it. That's pretty good. Caleb Woncare said 2-10. Carl said, "Wow, poor Elko about the high school recruiting."
Yeah, I'll tell you who's poor is Shamar Turner. That dude, God bless him. He hung around. He could have gone pro. He stayed to finish it to play his senior year, and now he's the lone horse. I mean, it's Shamar Turner and a bunch of nobodies.
Caleb said he thinks they go 2-10 with the only 2 wins, Alcorn State and Ball State. Carl said Vandy SEC champs. They got us all hoodwinked. 2 people agree with Carl in the SEC media days. 2 people legit voted for Vandy as SEC champs. I mean, that's got to be a joke, right? Like, they should have their credentials removed because you can't just joke around about that. Just a man in Tennessee said, if Dollar Tree Jeff Bezos can win 3 games, it'd be a miracle. Let's see. Sam said they all hit the portal and now are at Ole Miss. Can't wait to see if attitude problems travel to Mississippi. Good question. Just a man in Tennessee said, got some Vandy homers at SEC Media Days. Apparently, for sure. Yep, for sure. Green Wave said, guys, we need to help Vandy out. Let's all walk on and boost their roster. Yeah, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be a good season for Vanderbilt. But here's what's interesting.
I will say Vandy's top weapon, and they're already talking about him. Cole Spence is healthy. He will be their top tight end. Everybody in the conference by the end of this year will know who Cole Spence is. And hopefully at the end of this year, Cole Spence is announcing that he's now a Vault, because he would be a great addition to the Tennessee roster. The coaching staff is very familiar with him. They recruited him to Central Florida when he was in high school. Vanderbilt is planning on him being their number 1 target on offense at tight end, because he catches everything. So he's a huge target, 6'6", 235-ish, runs like a deer, great hands. Would love to see him in Knoxville.
Caleb said Clark Lee's last year, but again, I think Vandy should move to the Sun Belt Conference. Sam said Vandy needs to spend all their NIL money on baseball and basketball. Just a man in Tennessee said rough times ahead for the Commodores, eventual relegation to the Sun Belt.
Yep.
Well, so let's get down to brass tacks here, because based on what we've now said, rankings wise, it is when Tennessee first announced that there were no longer going to be divisions, that it was just going to be the top 2 teams, we immediately on the very next show that we had talked about how are they going to pick the SEC championship game? Because what if there's 3 teams tied for second place and none of them played each other during the season, which was possible? What if that happened? How do you break that tie? Well, Rustin, you had Georgia 12-0. How many teams did you have at 11-1? Which teams?
Tennessee, Texas, and Ole Miss.
So I had Georgia 12-0, but I also had 4 teams tied at 11-1 right behind them. Yep. Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee, and Texas. Now here's what's interesting. Both of us, you had 3, I had 4. Both of us picked teams that none of them played each other.
Yep. And I could have had Missouri. I made them 10-2, but I was hoping. I think they'll probably be 11-1 because their schedule's so weak. But
so we hadn't even started. If this happens, it's the first season, and there's already controversy about who's going to be that second team in the SEC championship game. So the very scenario that we talked about, goodness, a year ago, how long ago was that? A year ago that we talked about this?
Wow.
So a year ago, we bring this up like, well, how are they going to pick? What's going to be the criteria for picking the second team in the SEC championship game? Because you can't use head-to-head because none of them played each other. So how in the world do you pick that next spot? And already there would be controversy.
They're going to have to go by national ranking. That's about the only thing left.
Yeah. And so then it just becomes very subjective, and everybody's ticked off because but let's be honest, that's not just like a whimsical decision. You have a first round bye on the line, because if you win the SEC championship game, you have a first round bye in the playoff. So that's not just like a haphazard decision. Like, that's tough.
I'll say what I said a year ago when we talked about this. If I'm those coaches, I'm politicking the presidents right now to eliminate the SEC championship. Get rid of it. It's worthless. It doesn't do anything but hurt the conference. Ditch it.
Just a man in Tennessee said Tennessee, Bama, and Auburn all tied for the SEC title in '89. Green Wave says sounds like we need a playoff for the SEC championship. Yeah, I mean, kind of. Caleb said maybe they'll use strength of schedule.
I think they'll go to national rankings before they'll do that, because strength of schedule is also arbitrary. I mean, they basically blind drew the schedules, so one team gets the benefit of a lucky draw over another one.
Yeah. Tony said he thinks nationally they'll go to a 16-team playoff in the next few years.
They need to.
It's very interesting. I mean, I've got 5 teams in the SEC 11-1 or better, 4 at 11-1, and Georgia at 12-0.
I could have that too, very easily.
And it's going to be really intriguing to see how they pick that second spot. And like I said, it's not just a throwaway decision. Oh, it's just SEC championship. No. There is a first round bye on the line in that game. That is a huge game still. So already in year one, there could be a lot of controversy, a whole lot of controversy. Because, and like I said, it's so intriguing. All 4 teams that are tied there at 11-1, none of them played each other. So you can't use tiebreaker. Jim said the same Auburn that lost to New Mexico. Yeah. They'll be a little bit different this year. They got some 5-star recruits in there, and they got a good coach. So we'll see.
Like I said, I'm not joking when I say the entire Auburn athletic department is complaining about Hugh Freeze spending everyone else's NIL money. Like, that's not a joke. Yeah. That's real. So, and by the way, that New Mexico quarterback is now the starting quarterback at Vanderbilt.
Sam said Florida State says it's totally arbitrary. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Just a man in Tennessee said, I think there will be some upsets and injuries we don't foresee. 100%. Totally agree. He said going 11-1 in this league is ridiculously tough. Totally agree. Absolutely. But as the more and more it expands, the more and more teams there are, then the likelihood of a team going 11-1 increases, because there's just more teams to be in that situation. And a couple of teams got very favorable schedules this year, which is why I think we had more than usual going 11-1. So, very, very difficult. It's going to be fascinating to watch that unfold, to see. Yeah, these are preseason issues. You're right, but it may end up being postseason issues if this does come to fruition. And you got, I mean, let's just say there's 2. Let's forget it. Let's say there's 2 teams. Forget 3. Forget 4. What if there's 2 teams tied for second and they didn't play each other? How are you gonna do that tiebreaker? Because you can't use head to head. All of a sudden, it gets really difficult. So, and very subjective. So, well, this has been a lot of fun. We knew it'd be a long show because it was a long show last time, and it was again. But Sam said, "Who's for a 9-game conference schedule now?" Not me. Give me as many cupcakes as we can, because the 8 games in the conference are going to be tough enough. So,
yep.
But it would, I agree, if you're saying if you're for it, I agree it would resolve some of this that we're talking about now, because there would be another conference game that would, cancel out maybe those some of that. There might be a head-to-head matchup that could help solve that second spot. Just a man in Tennessee said, y'all going any games? I hope so. Planning on it.
I don't know what I'm doing Tuesday, much less a month and a half from now.
So I hope I'll be there. I got to go to a couple last year, so that was good. Green Wave said, let's be honest, it'll be whoever Saban says should be the second place. That's pretty good. Tony said, I don't think anyone goes undefeated in the SEC. That is totally possible, because Georgia's schedule is crazy tough. So that is totally possible. Carl said we just need to go 12-0. If we do that, we avoid all those headaches. That's fair, man. Absolutely. Let's just go 12-0. I love it. Let all the other people have to worry about how they're going to pick the second place team. Let's just go 12-0 and make sure we're the number one team. I'm all for it. Absolutely. Jim said he's got tickets to the Tennessee NC State game in Charlotte. Oh, that's cool. That'll be a fun one. That's going to be a fun game. I hope you have a great time. That's going to be a really fun one. Hey, there's non-stop flights from Chattanooga to Charlotte. So just a man in Tennessee said he'll be in Charlotte too. That's cool. Gail said, good night, Vol Bros. Great show tonight. Double thumbs up. Hey, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. We would love it if you'd like the video and subscribe to the channel. That'd be amazing. We love that. And we hope all of you have a great, great week. We'll be back Thursday night. I hadn't talked wrestling. Thursday work for you?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So we'll be back Thursday night. Looking forward to I'm going to try to line up a bunch of guests over the next several weeks. So looking forward to having some folks on the show. If you're listening, Sandoval, I'm coming for you, buddy. I want to have you on the show. Carl said back-to-back natties for the Vols, baseball and football. Hey, I'm all for it, man. Let's do it. Just get in the playoff. That's all that matters. Just get in the playoff. Anything can happen once you get in the playoff. Yep. Just get in the playoff. That's the goal. Green Wave said Thursday it is. Hey, we appreciate it. Carl said, thanks, fellas. Thanks, man. We appreciate you, Carl. We hope all of you have a great, great evening. Go Vols. And we will see all of you on Thursday night. It's been a lot of fun. Jim said, hit the like button, buddies. I totally agree. It's great advice. So hope all of you have a great evening. Good night, everybody.